you our demo, and at this time around I'm going to uh, do and show you how you can model a risk register within the tool itself. So again, big picture has many capabilities, but Jira itself allows a user to do a lot of customization, and with that customization, the benefit is that many of the artifacts, like an issues log, a risk log, uh, a decisions log, an assumptions log, that are created in the course of project planning and then for management of the project, can be constructed so that they're within the application itself rather than separate artifacts on a Word or an Excel document outside of the tool. And it makes managing the project very convenient. And especially since this is a cloud-based tool and the project team itself can work collaboratively within the space, having these artifacts within the tool makes things just so much easier for your own projects related to this course. But even if you ever find yourself in an organization and you're managing projects within Jira, and even without the big picture add-on, simply within Jira proper, you can still create many of those artifacts by using the issue types or the issue type and customizing that within Jira. Now, before I go on, in the last little demo, if you recall, we set this up, this small little project up. We utilized the network diagram example from class, and we simply were able to input this into Jira/Big Picture, and we were able to identify the critical path. And at that time, I indicated that the parent activity, which is really our project 2023 scheduling demo, there was, if you recall, a hand, and this parent activity was not taking on the dates within it. So technically it's supposed to be aligned with the start date of the first activity, which is today, Monday, November 13th, if I'm doing the math correctly, and the very last activity, which is on the critical path and the shortest duration in which the project can continue. I believe this had a total duration of 11 days. That was what the critical path was. And again, if we did everything correctly. But there was a hand over here, and it wasn't rolling up those dates. The hand, if you if you hovered over that, you would see at that time it was a manually scheduled activity. And if you wanted it to take the dates from within those child activities below, you had to change it to a auto bottom up task. And so if you just depend on what tool you're using, if you're on a Mac, if you're on a Windows device, things may be a little bit different. Here on the Mac, it's just like a double finger tap. It brings up the various configurations. It used to be manual, and that's why it wasn't taking on those dates. But if you change it to auto bottom up, meaning that it's auto scheduling from the dates below, then what you'll do is this will automatically adjust outward, and you'll see the duration should align with the critical path. So having said that, and I didn't want to necessarily troubleshoot that while I was in the middle of a demo, you can see that that's a fairly easy thing to do. Okay, so how do we create a risk issue type? So under project settings, as I showed in class earlier, there is a opportunity to create new issue types. So the project that we selected, the Scrum template, comes with issue types: epic, bug, story, and task. And again, you can do a little bit more reading offline, but really an issue type, the way that I see it, is just some unit of work. And we can leverage those issue types in many different ways to create the project or to create other artifacts or other pieces of information that we want to capture within the project that are not necessarily task related and don't belong in a Gantt chart and don't contribute to the scope of work and or the schedule itself, but it's important information that we want to be able to maintain. So these are the default. And if you notice here, the default themselves come with fields already set up. So there's a summary field, there's a description field, and then there's some context fields as well that can be used to provide further context for that issue type. And all of it is drawn on from the right hand side. So there's various different fields that we can use either to add to the existing issue types or when we create our own. So there's a drop down field, there's a number field, a timestamp field, label fields, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new issue type, and I've done this a few times, but I'm going to call it risk, and I'm just going to call it risk issue type. You can simply refer to it as risk because it is really going to be the first time you're creating such an issue type. You can provide a description and say this issue type. Okay. We can also change our icon. It's useful to change icons because then based on the visual element, you can have different issue types with different icons associated with them. Again, there's nothing that says that you have to select the question mark icon, but since it's risk, there's a nice synergy by selecting the question mark. So we'll do that. And we're going to create this issue type. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to see again sort of the default fields. We can always remove any of these if they're not required, if we don't need any of them, but we can certainly keep adding additional fields. Now, what's important here is you want to be able to align this with the risk register template that I shared with you in class. I don't have it brought up over here, but I can do and maybe let me just do a quick search on my desktop. I don't have it set up. Probably should have. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to try to find it quicker. But this word appears in a lot of different stuff that I've done. So let me just kind of continue to look here. Here it is. This is the one that I provided, and you'll see here we've got columns for risk description, category, of which there are multiple categories that you can select when trying to further clarify the type of risk, so that we can organize them a little bit better. And that's typically what we do in projects. Some risks are associated or affect the schedules, some affect costs, some affect operations or their operational nature. They may be knowledge specific. So these are not set in stone. If you do a little bit of research online, you can see that there's many different ways of categorizing risk, and this is really up to the organization. If there's an enterprise project management office, these things are typically defined well ahead, and the projects just need to align to those, and there's probably some documentation that explains what that category is and what it's used for. If you do go online and do a quick search, and we haven't talked about risk and risk management in class just yet, but if you do a quick search on a risk management plan, it will more than likely have how risks are going to be categorized within a given organization and what these categories mean. So there will be definitions. Right now, for the purposes of this, we can just align on and say that these are, as I've provided to you, the categories that you can utilize to categorize the risks that you identify for your video series project. Risks are also categorized by their probability and impact. And again, this is sometimes unique to the organization. I've seen some where the impact is a 3-point Likert scale, so it's like low, medium, or high. Sometimes it's simply by percentage type, so 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. Or there's ranges within it. So again, the whole idea here is to think about, well, what is the likelihood or the probability that this risk will occur? Is it extremely likely, almost guaranteed to occur, or is it almost negligible or very unlikely to occur, and somewhere in between? Likewise, we have the same thing for impact. So not only do we look at risks from their likelihood of occurrence, but also if they do occur, what type of impact will they have on the project? So it could be impact on scope, time, and cost itself, which are really the fundamental areas that risks can can affect. It could be the usability or the quality of the outcome. And so what we look at is it going to be a significant impact? So a risk can have a very low probability of occurrence, but if it does occur, it could be significant in nature, that it could affect one or more of those areas extremely. So, it could cause the budget to exceed 30, 40, 50, 60%, whatever the threshold is for impact, or it could cause the scope to grow considerably. It could affect the quality to a point where the product itself or the application, the process is unusable, and so forth. And those two values, the probability and the impact, give us what we call a risk score. So it's really just a multiplication, a product of probability and impact. And if you're using a 5-point scale for each, and you kind of do simple values of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like I've done here for probability and for impact, then something with a probability very high with a impact of very high would have a risk score of 25. So it's just 5 times 5. And the reason we do this is because projects can't typically manage or actively manage every risk, and there are some risks that do not need the similar amount of attention. We may be able to look at some risks that have low probability of occurrence and or low impact as risks that we can safely accept without putting into place considerable mitigation strategies, or even look at ways of eliminating risk. Which brings me to the next area, the risk response. So typically, and we'll talk about this further in class, but I mean, the 4 really sort of ways of managing risk is to accept the risk, to eliminate it, to mitigate it or reduce the impact, or to transfer the outcome or effect of that or risk on a third party. Here I've given us avoid, control, accept, transfer, which are very similar to the eliminate, mitigate, accept, or transfer. And if we're not sure, then maybe we have another category here where we investigate the risk further to kind of understand it. And then finally, we have a mitigation strategy. So I want to create this in Jira. So again, let's do this. It's going to make this a little bit smaller so it's kind of available for me. To make this a little bit smaller as well. Okay, so I kind of have this in here for me. Okay, so let's try to mimic our fields in the risk register in this risk issue type. So the summary can be just a short little title of the risk itself, and the description is just a field that can further elaborate and describe the risk in greater detail. So you can have a nice short sort of title that highlights what the risk is, and then use the description field for a more detailed description of that, or a narrative description of that particular risk. So now we have a category of risk, and what we can do here is we can actually add a drop down. Okay, we're going to call this category, okay, because that's what it is. So we're going to call that category, and if you notice now I've got the category here, but it's before the description. Here it comes after, so we're just going to kind of move that over. And we haven't finished defining it. We can kind of describe how people should see the field. That's fair, we can just leave it as is. But in here we can start putting our options, and those options can be the ones that we see here. So I'm not going to build all of these out, I'm just going to do a few of them. So we've got option for selection when we do the drop down of cost. We've got schedule. We've got technological, operational, external, maybe I will do all of them, external, hardware related. I don't have in here software, but maybe we could have put in a software category as well. Scope related, knowledge related, or just something other. So we've got all of our options in there. We're going to save those changes. Okay, just good practice to kind of save them. So we've got our category. Okay, next we've got our probability field. That also is a drop-down field, so let's add another one in here. We can call it probability or likelihood. Okay, again, I'm going to change the order in here since that's the way that I want to be able to do that. And I had the following. I had very high, high, medium, low, and very low. Okay, save those changes again. Okay, now we've got the impact. So again, a drop down because it's going to be the same. And we're going to have very high, high, medium, low, and very low. Save those changes. And again, just because I want to kind of align this, we're going to move this down to under, oops, sensitive as it is. Okay, and we've got the risk score. So the risk score is a number, so we can kind of either put in a short little field in there. I haven't tried using the number. We can do that and see what sort of comes up here, and so we can call this the risk score. Okay, enter a default value. So let's just save those in there. We'll see how this looks afterwards, and if we always, if it doesn't look quite like our template over here, we can always make some adjustments. That's one of the beauties of using Jira. We've got a response, so let's do another drop down field for response. Okay, again, I'm going to move this to the bottom. It's the order that I want these to. And the responses, just to make sure that we do this, we had a void. We have control, accept, transfer, and investigate. Okay, save the changes. And then we have one final field, mitigation strategy. And that one probably it'd be beneficial to not a short text, but an actual paragraph field. So we're going to add that in there. Call this mitigation strategy. Okay, and save those changes. Okay, and again, I'm going to just bring this down so it aligns with that. Okay, save changes, and now we have our issue type created. So we go back to the project itself. Okay, now for the risks, I know that this may have already been submitted. If you get an opportunity to create it in Jira, you can do so. If you submit it in an Excel spreadsheet, that's okay. But for future purposes, what we can do now is we can create and choose risk issue type. And what you'll see here is, there's a status in here, but this could be our summary. So we can call this just risk 1, team's lack of Jira knowledge, right? As a risk to the project, you can describe it here in a little bit more detailed, as this is the initial use of Jira. The team may not be in a position to create all artifacts in a timely and or of quality. So maybe timely manner or of quality. That would meet requirements, thus affecting the overall mark of the group. And again, I'm being fairly generic here. So in terms of category, now since this is a knowledge specific, or it could even be technological if you want to look at it, or it could be software related. Again, it's up to you how you want to categorize it, since most of you may not have experience with Jira. The probability that this may be a risk of higher likelihood of occurrence, very high, could have a high impact on your project overall, in which case the risk score here can be 20. I'm going back to that template, and the risk is, well, you don't want to avoid that. You don't want to just accept it. You probably want to control that risk, and then you can come up with this mitigation strategy. How are you going to do that? So watch LinkedIn learning videos, follow demos in class, use Jira, Jira documents to review the capabilities of the tool. Whatever you're sort of following along, and so now you can create that risk. Okay, and that risk has been created. So the risks are now stored in Jira, but what we don't have yet is quote unquote this artifact, this document, or a collection of all the risks that you would have if you went from risk 1 through for 20. So what you can do is, as you create, and maybe let's, for the purposes of a demo, let's create another risk. I'm going to keep this one a little bit more simpler. I'm just going to call it risk 2. I'm going to put in just some random words to describe it. I'm going to select and say that's related to schedule, medium impact, medium probability. Probably means a risk score of 9, 3 times 3. We're going to transfer this risk, and you can come up and you can provide more info here on how the risk will be transferred to a third party. So again, the only reason I'm doing this is so that we can have a couple of risks to build out our risk register. Okay, so now if we go under filters, we use filters to kind of filter out the information and put it in a tabular format within Jira, and we can save those filters, and those filters can in essence mimic the Excel spreadsheets. We can also then create dashboards. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to view all filters, and I've done this multiple times for multiple demos, but what let's do is we're going to create a new filter. And in this case, I'm going to create the filter under this particular project, which is the 2023 scheduling demo, because some of you may have multiple projects within your Jira instance, or maybe you only have one project. So it allows you to pull these from every project that you've created. So you probably want it from a singular project. The issue type that you want to pull is what we just created, risk issue type, or in this case risk, and you want to pull in all statuses, or things that are to do, or so forth. And you can see here it pulled in the risks themselves and some of the fields, not all of them, and so you may need to then work through and bring in some of the fields that were not in here. So I think if I recall what we created, these were unique fields. So mitigation strategy, so we want to bring that in. We want to bring in probability. We also want to bring in so probability and impact. So impact would have been somewhere over here. Yeah, there it is. Again, if there might be any ones, you can just kind of bring those in. And over here, you notice that it brought them in. And if you want to change the order, again, you can change the order because, well, they're not in the order that we set them up. But you want to try to mimic. You want to try to mimic this particular, or is it the particular risk register, so that it has the same. So it goes from the description, right? So we can easily move this to over in here. So it's the description, then the category, then we had the probability. One more time. Sometimes it's a matter of how okay, let's do it that way. Category, probability, impact. We had the risk score. I didn't bring in the risk score here. So again, if we wanted to, we can easily bring in additional, columns. So again, let's look at, let me just make this a little bit bigger. So we can bring in the additional columns. And in this case, we also had, I think, risk score. So let's find that here. Alphabetical order. Risk score number. So let's bring that in because that's what I've done here. So here's a risk score. So let's move that. And then we had mitigation. We didn't select a mitigation strategy, I guess, when we did some of this stuff. So anyhow, I'll let you go through some of the categorization, but here's our risk register exactly. And every time you add a new one, and if you want to see just how easy it is, let's just say we want to create a third risk. So because risks are not static in a project, so let's just say, and I'm gonna keep it even more simpler. Just gonna put in a few things in here. I didn't really do the math here, but I think it's 3. Risk response, this one will investigate. Okay, and then what's gonna happen is, and you may have to refresh the screen here, but it should pull in, and there's risk number 3. And if you want to kind of sort by the risk numbers themselves, you can do that as well. So this is how you can create a risk register by introducing a new risk issue type within Jira. You can configure it so that it has all the appropriate fields that you would have in the template that I provided, and then you can just keep all of your risks within Jira rather than a separate document, an artifact outside of Jira. So again, thank you very much for kind of listening along, and that concludes this particular demo.